Coming to you from UBN Studios in Burbank, California. You are listening to the Unsugarcoated podcast with your host, Aalia.
Hello, everybody. This is your host, Aalia. I'm super excited to be with you once again. I hope that this episode finds you well and enjoying the new year so far. And I hope that you continue to look forward in 2021. As if you caught our last episode, you know that what we are focused on for 2021 is unity. And I think that that's very important for what I'd like to see in my community and in our society. So I just really, thank you for tuning in and listening to our guests, because that's always what we want to do. We want to bring people who are in the thick of making those changes and creating that cohesiveness we so desperately need. So quick, as far as me checking in with my two teenagers, two of my four kids are teenagers. One is in the 8th grade, one is in the 10th grade in the Los Angeles Unified School District. They have not been in a traditional school setting since last March, and well, we still don't know when they're going to go back into the classroom. I don't know how I feel about this at times. I'll be quite honest with you. I want to be safe. I would like for teachers to be safe, but I recognize the impact that this is having for children, and I understand that not everybody has the circumstances we do, so it's hard for me to just be selfish. So actually, when they had sent out the notices that our kids were going to be going back to school for the hybrid model, I did sign up. I put my fear. I know people love to use that word. That put that fear aside, and I was down. And then, of course, we got the notification that they won't be going back so quickly. So we remain to see what happens. It cannot be easy to be an educator in 2020 or a student. But even before 2020, we have to acknowledge that we've been living with a very fractured and often uneven school infrastructure. Our public educational system has been flawed for a very long time, especially depending on what zip code you're talking about, for sure. I personally have had kids that I've had them in private school as well as public schools. I went to a public school. I never went to but my public school gave me a good education. And so I didn't have this perception that my children being in a public school meant that they were going to have a less than adequate education. And then I put them into public schools. And so I've definitely seen it. But even on that, I've lived in Palos Verdes Estates, a beautiful little community outside of Los Angeles. I've talked about it. My son in 7th grade was doing AutoCAD engineering and working with high-tech technology. My daughter was in 5th grade learning how to do robotics. These were public schools. So again, what I was talking to, it seems that you only get that good education when you're in the right zip code. Now let's talk about our teachers. It is quite sad when education is one of the cornerstones of society, and how we operate is all contingent on that. But yet we make jokes about, well, if you don't want to make a lot of money, don't grow up to be a teacher. I don't understand how this is something we continue through. Maybe when I was younger, it was okay. Now I'm older and I don't understand. Now I've been a parent. I've had 4 kids go through the system. Why am I thinking that this is funny? Right? So just speaking to that a little, how many of you did have memories of a school teacher who impacted your life because they took the time to care for you, or they took the time, to teach you? And I definitely had, I not only have memories of that, I have even with my kids. Once again, I remember a teacher in my daughter's middle school. My daughter came home and told me that the teacher was in tears because the kids were being so disrespectful that that's all she could do was just cry. And I remember writing her an email that night saying, I'm so sorry. Those weren't my kids, and I would whoop my daughter's butt if she did it. But I am so sorry that you have to deal with that as an educator. At the same token, I've dealt with teachers that are very much burnt out. They don't want to hear me. They have way too many kids to deal with. And honestly, I would say that I've most experienced that in the LAUS Unified School District, which is a very, very big school district, no doubt. Teachers are overworked and underpaid, and the patience is getting shorter and shorter while school systems really try to balance, providing an effective system for our students. So I'm sure for some, education is the most unattractive job opportunity there is. And I would just have to tell you that is a sad thought to have, because I think that it is one of the most noble career decisions you could ever make for yourself and position to have. And we greatly need to show more gratitude to our educators. A revolution, perhaps? Well, then, I have brought the right person to you today. He has visited us before, speaking on cultural and racial topics with regards to raising youth through the school system. He is passionate about change for our teachers and students and communities. He is upending outdated beliefs about molding the next generation, and I'm excited for you to hear him talk about it. So whether you're a teacher or a student, I'd like you to hear what he has to say on this matter. Husband, father, and community leader Amen Rahh was born and raised in Compton, California, a certified trainer of trainers in restorative justice by the Institute of Restorative Practices. He has served the Los Angeles community as a teacher, assistant principal, and was selected by LAUSD to be the founding principal of University Pathways Public Service Academy, which aims to educate, empower, and enable all students to become agents of change. He is one of the most engaging speakers for transforming the way schools serve their at-promise student populations in America, and he is here to discuss his revolutionary ways and how it impacts the classroom and community. Ladies and gentlemen, author of Revolutionary School Culture, the six principles of unlocking your school's hidden treasure. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Amen Rahh.
Wow. Well, thank you. Thank you.
My friend.
Thank you.
My friend, I am so happy to see you. Please tell our audience where you're speaking to us from today, how you're doing.
Yes. I am in the lovely living room of my house, right here in South Central Compton area. Just happy to be here. Happy to speak in regards of education, and just happy to just break bread with a good friend of mine around just serious issues and serious topics, and just different ways in which we can spark interest around not only LA and California, but across the nation in regards of our young people and how they can just advance through and navigate and hopefully change the system.
Absolutely. Because yes, in a lot of major I got to say this. We know that in major metropolitan cities, there are educational systems and just this infrastructure that really doesn't work as well as it should. But ironically enough, I have family that teach out in like Texas, and we're talking like my mother-in-law and my sister-in-law live in Farmersville, Texas, and it is exactly how it sounds, Farmersville. But the stories that my sister-in-law, who is an assistant principal now, she was a teacher before middle school, the stories, you find it's not there. There are issues everywhere, and there are kids that struggle everywhere, and there are teachers that struggle everywhere. And especially with 2020, I want to say the U, as it's called, was in only its second, I think it was going into its third year. And it was already regarded as a model school for restorative communities, as well as establishing school-wide systems to improve student achievement. How have you guys fared 2020 as an educator, as a principal? Share with us what that's been like.
Well, before I get in that, I'll be remiss. As we are in the middle of the Nguzo Saba, the 7 principles of Kwanzaa, I want to give just thanks to my family, my ancestors, for being here, for equipping me with the sacred knowledge to be here in regards of collective work and responsibility. I just want to thank, if everyone does a little, we all can, if everyone does a little, no one person has to do a lot. And I just want to give thanks to my family, my wife, my daughter, my father, the legendary Amen Rahh, Professor Amen Rahh, who helped build the Black Studies Department at Long Beach State University out here. So got that out the way. So now to answer your question, you know what, we have fared pretty well in regards of because we already had a culture. We had a virtual culture, and I know every student, right? So as a principal, because I know every student, it helped me with the pivot in regards of distance learning, and being a founding principal where it's a small school where everybody feels like somebody. It just empowered my teachers to connect with young people. We like to believe that if we build the relationships with students, they will want to connect, right? They will feel inspired. Their self-efficacy will increase. They will feel the what we call love, right? And love, LOVE, which we call it the U, it's a living and learning off village energy, right? So that means that energy we provide, that love we provide, it provides you with living or learning off of the energy that's so profound, even COVID-19 will not disrupt it. So we were able to pivot and have virtual assemblies, have our house system, which is similar to after Harry Potter. If you're familiar with Harry Potter, where we have a culturally relevant house system where the houses are after House of Advocacy, House of Motivation, House of Friendship, and House of Courage, where our students are all together, where we gamify education and they compete. And we've been competing in a virtual way too. We've had students constructively compete with each other off of which house is doing the best, which house is showing up the most, which house has the most school pride. And it's still something that we have rooted in our school, because we believe that like that is something, the roots of our school, of family, of love, of friendship, of courage, of advocacy. That's the foundation. Those are the principles that we provide sacred knowledge to our young people on. So we've done pretty well. And like Marcus Garvey say, a student without knowing their history and knowing where they're from is like a tree without roots.
Right.
So we wanted to make sure that all of our students have the roots to grow. And I think we're doing a good job still in this environment.
I think that's awesome. And I love that you do the House of Motivation and Happiness. It is true. It's important to create a healthy competition amongst people, especially groups. And I know I used to do it with my companies. I'd always have my employees, you want to provide that incentive, the saying, you can take a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. And I'm of that mindset of, but you can put salt in the hay and make them thirsty. So I feel like what you focus on more is that part, making them thirsty, because it is a challenge to get teenagers. I mean, I know I'm not alone when I say my children have struggled. I mean, they and it's funny because like you said, we had not only gone to Palos Verdes, so, and you know this, we had moved from Palos Verdes and then we moved to View Park. And for that year that we were there, before we moved into where we're at now, they did CAVA, California Virtual Academy. And because it was designed for it, I mean, they were doing honor, they were engaged, they didn't struggle as much, but just the general, and I think your students are incredibly lucky to have you, might I say, because I know that my kids have just struggled being connected and being inspired and being motivated with this current setup.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I could say this too, it's an adjustment, right? I would be remiss if I said that, I don't want to make it appear that everything is great.
Right.
Our students are still have a lot of trauma, still have a lot of different things that are happening. However, it's an adjustment, right? It's not. At our school, we don't look at it as failing. Our students aren't failing.
Right.
Not one student earned an F at our school during this time, because this is an adjustment period. Like businesses are adjusting, right? There are some businesses that adjusted right away when March hit.
Right.
But there are some businesses that it took them 90 days to figure out what they're going to do. There's businesses right now that are still trying to figure out what their new business model is during this time. And I think schools are doing the same thing. Families are doing the same thing. And I think it's important for us to understand, especially in education, what really needs to shift and measure what matters.
Right. So on that, a couple things I learned and I love, because sometimes we use terminology not everyone is familiar with. I was, like restorative communities, are dedicated to social justice and action by cultivating fellowship and connection with people. And that's something you focus on a lot as well. And you've been in, also featured in other books and things like that. You tell us, you're from this community. You're from the community that you live in, and you teach, and you continue to create hope. Tell us how this became part of your purpose.
Yeah, it's my purpose because I was that kid, right? I was that student that was disconnected from school. I was that student that was going through public education without really the hope of finding myself in my journey and what I wanted to do. It wasn't really until I read the book called The Alchemist, and it talked about the story of finding your purpose and finding you, right? That treasure being you, and the story of Santiago finding his hidden treasure. And my hidden purpose, or my purpose and walking in my purpose, became unlocking that for young people, but not just young people, but from everybody I met, right? And that helped me as an educator, right? I never was a teacher. I was always an educator, and I define them distinctively differently, because a teacher, I feel, has this way of, at 3 o'clock or whatever your time frame, when you leave the door, when you leave the school building, you're done being a teacher per se, right? You teach during the infrastructure of a school building. As an educator, I like to define it as I never stop, right? This is a way of life. This is a philosophy. This is what I believe in regards of relationships, relevance, and rigor. And I believe no matter what, just like in running a business, I believe in relationships with the intent of belonging, relevance with the intent of purpose, and rigor with the attention to detail, but also the attention to competency and mastery. So just like with this podcast, you want to master it, right? You want to build relationships. You want to make it to be purposeful and meaningful, and then you want to master it. It means nothing if you don't get to that next level of mastery.
Exactly.
So being from the city, my passion was to unlock it for people that look like me and came from the city in which I come from. So I was blessed enough to be able to do that, to be able to open a school in which I come from, to say like, hey, I want to do something different. I want to build a school I wish I went to.
Right.
Right? Like I wish the principal, like growing up, no principal looked. It was, and being a principal wasn't nothing you aspired to be. Being a teacher wasn't nothing you aspired to be, because unfortunately, in education, and being a teacher and being in education is one of the most bullied professions in America.
Right.
Right? In regards to pay, in regards to respectability. So, I want to change that narrative. Right? I want to change that narrative for the people that come from the city. I want to change the narrative for the organizations. I want to change the narrative for that one kid that see themselves in me and say, man, damn, I want to be a principal. I want to be a principal like Principal Rahh, and I want to be better, and I want to, so that was my why.
That's awesome. Okay, let's talk about revolutionary school culture, because I love this concept. And you have said it's no longer enough for schools to follow the traditional path for all students. Every student comes with different needs that have to be addressed in their own individual ways. How, that's, first of all, that's obviously accurate. I understand that. You've put these bits of amazing wisdom into this book. Let's start with that. What do you mean? How do you envision it, better?
Yeah. First, I envision it better by, few things. One is bringing awareness to the systems in which block, especially students of color, from access. There's buzzwords around education all the time when you hear equity, equity, equity. You hear diversity, you hear equity, you hear all these buzzwords that really just drills down to people of color, right? And a lot of times, sometimes you could distinctively mess up when you say, hey, you're talking about people of color, but then you may be specifically talking about Black students. For example, in California, we have been focusing on what's called the academic achievement gap for the past 30 years, specifically for young Black male students. Over the last 30 years, that actual gap has widened, right? So if that gap has widened over the last 30 years and we've been focused on the achievement gap, that means we're doing something terribly wrong.
Right.
That means some people got it wrong. And I think a lot of times it's depending on who you talk to, it's actually the system has it absolutely correct. What I mean by absolutely correct is that this is intentional in regards of having an intentional academic gap, of showing the gap, right? Like the system is supposed to show the gap. And a lot of it is around standardized testing. A lot of it is around zip code. A lot of it is around the wealth gap in regards of access. So bringing light to some of the hurdles that exist. I always tell people like this: as an educator, you have two things. You're either working to be great within what we all can almost agree on, an inequitable system. You can work great within an inequitable system, or you can work great within an inequitable system, but also change the fact that it's an inequitable system.
Yes.
Right? And my role in revolutionary school culture is to bring awareness while also peeling back the layers of the inequities that exist within the system. One is around standardized testing. Also in regards of how college accepts students. Also in regards to the knowledge in regards of industry. See, in industry, in regards of what we consider success, right? So all these things collectively together is immediate impact on success for young people, but not just for young people, for the communities in which many people survive in, and changing that survival to thriving, right? I'll give you another example. many growing up in Compton, we were always taught like a great school is it was measured by how many kids they can get them out of the community, right? Like they're measured, if I'm measuring Compton, if I went to a school, it's like, oh man, that school must have been great because I was able to leave the community and go to a college away from the community. It was measured by how many kids they can get out. That doesn't change the fact that the community still have the problems that exist.
Right.
So if we are still, until the areas in which I serve, Compton, Watts, actually have employment, industry, infrastructure, policies that are equitable for access, the results will say because we will marginalize those people by zip code, by the color of their skin, and by their test score. Right? So now you feel like like I say all the time, like Dr. Carter G. Woodson, you feel that person not only with that melanin in their skin, but also because of their zip code, also because of their test score, that they are actually inferior.
Right.
So
exactly.
Why would their life matter, right? So all these things are the reason why things happen in the way society and things happen in society in which we live in.
That is such an important part, and I'm glad you mentioned that because I have a little, for our visual audience, you'll be able to see it. I'll read it for our audience, excuse me, but it's a picture of equality and equity. Equality, we have 3 boys standing on the same size boxes. They're all looking over the fence. One is very tall, one is semi-tall. He can see over the fence, and there is one who cannot see over the fence at all. Equality equals sameness. Equality is about sameness. It promotes fairness and justice by giving everyone the same thing. But it can only work if everyone starts from the same place. In this example, equality only works if everyone is the same height. So equality. Now, equity, the picture has different heights, and so it's adjusted boxes under each individual, so they have all the 3 individuals have the same eyesight. So underneath that, equity equals fairness. Equity is about fairness. It's about making sure people get access to the same opportunities. Sometimes our differences and or history can create barriers to participation, so we must first ensure equity before we can enjoy equality. And I love this image because it exactly speaks to what you're talking about. This is exactly in the vein of what you speak of, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, in my book, I take it a little bit further, right? I take it like equality and equity is one part of it. So yes, that picture really highlights in regards of equality and equity. And however, what I'm fighting for is actually, if you pull it back up, we want to tear down that freaking fence.
Right. There you go. Yes.
Tear down the fence.
Yes. You are so right. You are so right. Thank you for that.
Right.
Amen.
Right. We want to tear down that fence, and that fence, and when you turn down that fence, that is liberation.
Yes.
Right. That means that now there's access, and it's fluid access. And when we're talking about that and what that looks like in education, is providing the resources to those who need it. Right. And being intentional about it. Right. But also more than that, being aware of the tragedies and the atrocities that have happened that have caused us to get to this point.
Right.
It's not like this just happened overnight.
Right.
This has been intentional. There has been already, like everyone can agree that there have been some atrocities that have happened to marginalized communities across the nation, in which schools have not been awarded, or there hasn't been retribution, and it comes to that.
Right.
And I think it's important for those things to be discussed. Like coming up with an equity word for a position to buffer equality is not equity, right? And I think like those things have to be met with candid conversations and courageous conversations, but then it needs to be led with immediate action. Right. And that immediate action can come in 2 forms. It can come with time, or it comes with money. Right. And because resources for the most part come with either time or comes with money, money to purchase, money to in value, whatever the case may be, it is coming in those cases for our young people to get addressed. So I think that is really powerful. I think that is the spark. That is the spark, because equality is it is where it is almost the status quo of keeping things the way they are at. The rich get richer.
Right.
Right.
I know. I read, and we had talked. I remember you and Byron both joined me on Black Tuesday to amplify Black voices. And by the way, I think that when we talk about within the education system, color and financial means have a lot to do with who gets what. You know, like when I spoke about Palos Verdes, you know, the reason we moved there was because of the school system. Actually, we intentionally moved there because there was a graduation rate. 98% of the students that graduate from Palos Verdes High go straight into university, which is, you know, but yet you look at LAUSD now. Yes, I know more students, a bigger statistic, you know, it's hard to compare, yet, you know, you're talking a significantly lower graduation rate, like you said, and that's just, you know, but, and then you have a higher dropout rate. And it's, you talk about how the direction you take your school will determine how effective your school will be, and that the effectiveness of your school will shape the future, not just of your students, but of the wider community. Because a lot of what you also talk about is not just solely focused on students and people who have children in school, but the people who live in the community, whether they have a child in their school or not, right? Like you get out there and really encourage the community to do that.
Absolutely. And community to world. So at our school, we focus a lot on what's called self-actualization. If you're familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you know, at that top of that pyramid, you want to achieve something that's called self-actualization, where you really know yourself, you know your needs, and you know yourself in context to the world.
Right.
Which is great, right? You know your inner self, you know your strengths, you know your growth, you're able to self-reflect, you have your psychological needs, you have your safety, you have these things aligned so you can achieve self-actualization. As we know, when it comes to marginalized communities, when it comes to like tension, trauma, many of our students suffer with overcoming this collective healing that's needed to take place to achieve self-actualization. So for our school, we focus on this. Like, we are intentional about students achieving self-actualization, but that's not where it ends. That's actually where it begins, right? Because what we want is for you to achieve self-actualization to eventually get the community to reach community actualization.
Right.
What does that mean? That means that you have an obligation to show others how to do it as well, right? Meaning that you leaving the U and becoming a 4.0 student, and you go to Harvard or some great institution and you become a CEO, millionaire, doctor, that is great. I feel good. I've helped out an individual case or individual family. However, that's not my mission. My mission is the community. And so if I get you to that point, or you get yourself to that point off of the knowledge, great. But if you neglect giving back and showing the surroundings and your network, or going back to where you came from and fetching it, or providing for your community, then I, as a principal and as an educator, have failed, right? Because I want to instill in the young people, it's not just in what you do, or it's not just in what you become, it is also what you do.
Right.
And going back to your community, or going back within and taking that knowledge that you got from your community and wherever you are at in the world, and providing that love of living off and learning off of village energy to wherever your network is, that should be the role, because that makes the world a better place, right? Somebody who has a 4.0, go to UCLA, go to USC, but then they continue the cycles of oppression, right? Meaning that they could be black or brown or whatever color, I don't care, whatever ethnicity, and you are that boss of that organization, and you continue the cycles of oppression. What does that do?
Right. Which is ironic, because when you grow up, that is one of the most incredibly often questions you will get. What do you do? What do you do? Every time somebody asks me, so what do you do? I'm like, I change the world. I do my best to change the world. Is that an answer? I mean, I don't, but it's because people want to put the label on you and want to know, but I think that that is incredible, how you promote that and promote that fire and that love. I love it how you connect it to village, because I was brought up kind of also with that. It takes a village to raise a child. And in my community, if I see a little kid and I'm going to talk to them like they're my little kid or something, like, hey, get off, go, you know what I'm talking about? You know how you get on another kid that's not yours, but not because you're mean, because you feel protective, like you're part of the community. I'm going to look out after you the same way I'm going to look out after one of my kids. And I think that in villages, you always respected the people with knowledge, right? You respected the people that had the medicine of the knowledge, that passed down the stories from generation to generation. And I feel that educators are so much the same. And when we talked yesterday about the lack of respect, I think, like there's this desire to shape, and you have a lot of people who become a teacher or become an educator straight off with an idea of what it's going to be like. And then you get in the classroom, and then there are these challenges they face. I feel like in your book, you've really tried to go out there and encourage these educators and teachers, whatever realm they're working in within the educational system, to really like take stock of themselves and what they're doing and what they're bringing. And like you said, overcoming those traumas and challenges and helping the students and helping create a better community, right?
Absolutely. So within the book, we go through 6 principles, and it's specifically for being educators. It is really being a humane-oriented leader, but also a humane-oriented teacher. What that means is that you are trauma informed, right? You understand, and you are able to recognize, and you're able to implement, right? You're able the transgenerational, the historical, and current traumas in which your students survive or thrive in. Right. So like being trauma informed is one thing, and then you're able to build this community, right? And that community is like you're actually building the village. And when we talk about restorative practices, it's like first you got to have something to restore. Right. So you can't restore something that is already destroyed. You know what I mean? Like if it never was put together, like you're not restoring it. You're just building. So you have to build it first, right? So you build this community, and then you start putting in, like for example, in your family, you have traditions. I'm sure you have traditions in your family. I'm sure during the holidays, you did something that you usually do. If it's a family, well, I know my family, or wife, she makes me dress up in the plaid, and do the family pajamas stuff, right? That's our tradition. My family, we celebrate the 7 principles. So we speak with each other. We do these type of traditions, but the same thing in the school, right? In your classroom, what are traditions that you have? Each day you should have these traditions that you are building. And then when something happens, it's inevitable. Something happens with young people because those are teachable moments. You're a parent, I'm a parent. Sometimes our kids do things. It's inevitable, right? And now we're able, because we built this love, we built this village, we built this community. Now we're able to repair it to get it back to what it was. Right. And then now you can start holding accountability. You start working on self-discipline. And these are all things that are a humane-oriented teacher. But it's going back first and understanding, recognizing, and responding to the cultural needs of students, right? So it is really important for those principles to be aligned with educators to understand that, right? And then once you have that lens, you're able to now act with the lens of equity versus just a lens of equality. Right. And I think that's really what the book highlights, and does a great job of highlighting in regards of a revolution that's needed in education. Yeah, because you've said that the schools are failing students with the current way, where you're not considering the cultural and racial and intellectual differences of students. Like that is, I mean, it's true, and it's not necessarily meant in a bad way, but I mean, I know I've had teachers who didn't understand Islam very well, and they're teaching about it, and then when my kid would come home and say, well, I heard this isn't, and they knew it was wrong, but they didn't even feel that they could communicate with the teacher, or that even if they did, it wasn't going to be really, well received. And there are those, and as a result, my kids were the ones who got called terrorists in school, and, kids would run up and give them a paper bomb and run away and make jokes and things like that.
I mean, which, they're kids and they grow past, and in some ways that's part of growing up. But when it comes to the schools, the teachers, I think that's what I mean to say. Sometimes when I hear about kids doing it, doesn't surprise me. But when I hear about some of the things that my kids will say the teachers have said, then my ears perk up a little bit more. Like, wait a minute, that's bothersome.
Well, if I could say something too, 'cause I think it's important, is think about like when we had our discussion in March or wherever we had it, there were so many people that learned so much about American history during the time of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, that they were like, why weren't I told this in school? Why weren't I taught this in school, right? They were learning so much. And you have to also, just as parents, it's what we are not being taught, right? So for that teacher, many of them went through the same educational system you went through, that you probably didn't get, right? And it takes that humility. Like it's three things. Like you want to be humble and you want to be hungry to continuously learn.
Mm-hmm.
But I would be remiss if I didn't say that this is also an inherited problem in regards that needs to be discussed and resolved when it comes to sacred knowledge for our educators. So you talk about like the metropolitan cities, but it is happening all around the nation. See, because a lot of times because it's out of sight, it's out of mind. It doesn't mean that it does. Like racial context, microaggression, implicit bias exists everywhere.
Yes.
Right? It exists everywhere. So if it's not being addressed and how we address it, because those young people will be out in the world and those will be the CEOs, those will be the job seekers and the employers, and they will continue those cycles, right? Because when we talk about the construct of race, right? Because we know there's human race, but this is a social construct of those like Josiah Knott, who wrote like, hey, like studied the brain and said like those with melanin skin are inferior because of X, Y, and Z, and tried to prove it scientifically, and it's proven wrong, but people believe that.
Right.
So when did that change? And it's continuing through subtle ways off of this supremacy or this feeling of inferiority that happens a lot inherently, that we have to make sure that we unlearn so that we are able to unlock, right, that liberation that's needed for educators, students, parents, for us all. I mean, I'm still working on things I need to unlearn. So I think it's being vulnerable for those things to manifest so that a revolution could truly happen.
Yes. And I'm with you. And I think that even like as a parent, we should consider what teachers are dealing with. And, I always hold the teachers I've worked with or the educators to a certain standard, but I just got to say it. I mean, I could not, it's going to sound bad, but I don't know that I have the patience to teach a group full of kids. I can barely handle my 4 kids, let me be honest. One's already grown and married. The 2 teenagers at home right now are giving me a run for my money. And I've got the 4-year-old coming up in tow. I tell you, it has to be stressful, and it has to have a set of challenges. But I do think you think it does start at the top. And if the school systems, I have to tell you of a story I had. I don't know if I'd shared it before, but when it comes to a principal, when my son was at Palos Verdes, there was a kid that was picking on him. There was some threats that had been made. This was shortly after Parkland shooting, and within like a week or so. And so this particular kid that was kind of bullying my son, he had made a threat that they had to take seriously. But my son came home to me. I guess the office was handling it, but my son came home and told me what happened. So then I call the school, and I'm kind of telling you this story because I want to know, like, as a parent, how, I know we can be very, very demanding of the school system. But in this case, I remember talking to the principal and asking her, is it true? Because my son had warned me that this kid had actually circled the school one time for 3 hours, that she had to call the police on this kid. So I wanted to know if this was a child that I needed to be concerned about. And when the principal answered my call, she says, well, I can't tell you anything. I said, is it true that you've had to call the police on this kid? And I recognize that there's security or HIPAA and privacy laws in place. But here's where it confused me. I said to her this, Principal Rahh, I said, how can we help a child in our community if he is in need if you don't tell us? I said, let me ask you a question. If a kid gets lice in your school, what is the protocol? She said, well, we have to let all the parents know. I said, so you're telling me that it's okay for you to tell me if someone has lice, but you can't tell me if you have a child. I just flat out told her, how can we help kids if you don't let us in and you're too busy trying to keep up this image that you have it all under control?
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
What, like, tell me what you think about that story.
I think you really nailed it, right? I think being a principal, it's levels to it, right? And your community is levels to it, and you want to make sure that you try to have everything under control, right? Sometimes transparency and vulnerability is not what many schools seek to have in regards to things. Of course, letting the name or those things are like, that's not going to happen. However, in regards of as a principal and as a leader of the school site, it's the number one job is safety of our young people, and to ensure the safety of young people, but also the feeling of safety for the families and parents that trust in me or that principal for the welfare of their kid. So whatever procedure that is, if you're feeling that, because what I'm hearing from you is that you're still feeling uneasy about the situation and the circumstances that exist. Whatever that principal said, it didn't make you feel that much more safe, right? And I think that is where you still must push, because you want to feel safety for your child and your family in whatever that is. And that's why I love restorative justice practices, because within that, it is a form of communication. It's a process in which we communicate to get what you need in all respectable forms in regards of how that process can make work. So if I was in that role, I would have definitely tried to do everything I could to say, like, okay, what is it that you need, right? And what is it that we could also do collectively together as a community in regards of making that feel safety? But also, these are all the things that we have already done to ensure the safety of our young people in regards of the traumas that exist, right? These things happen, right?
Which when we
happen,
go ahead.
Young people are suffering through different things, from suicidal ideations to all these different things. Of course, we're not letting know the student, but in regards of our procedures of first shooter, for suicidal ideations, for lockdown, these are our protocols, right? These are our safety plan, right? So now I would have been saying, like, hey, this is already agreed upon safety plan that we're following, but also doing the best way of making sure that you feel and understand that we are doing everything we can to ensure the safety of our young people.
Yeah. And of course, that was one of the things I had said to her. I said, because she said he's harmless. And I just have to share this one little part, because it kind of, principals are human. And I remember she said to me, in that instance, she said, well, it's okay. We know him. He will be fine. There's no risk. And two things to that. I did tell her, I'm sure that's what the Parkland school system thought as well. I think that as an educator, you never feel like that's going to happen at your school, but it can, and it does. And but what's more significant is, and I think she was a very, very well-intentioned principal. I'm not trying to like throw her under the bus or anything. But less than a year later, within the next academic school year, that same boy, I turn on the news and they have another boy in school was taken out by ambulance. And the school system is actually being sued because that same boy attacked another student in a bathroom. Another kid, they both had altercations, but literally put his head into the sink basin, and he had to be taken out by ambulance. The same kid that she told me was harmless, And so I say that to say you can't catch everything. And I think as educators, it is important to remember that. And so we have this revolution that is so valuable. You speak of, how do you envision these practices also, they contribute to breaking the school to prison pipeline, obviously, in certain communities, like that. And there is no, because again, when you talk to people and students are students, that happens everywhere. No matter, in the affluent schools, you've got kids doing stupid stuff and things that are not smart, and then you have just differently than lower economic communities or in the in between. You said, you are quoted as saying your leadership matters more than ever when times get tough. So Principal Rahh, we're definitely in tough times right now. You clearly remain a leader in your community and to the education system at large. What is your call to action to educational leaders right now?
My educational leaders, and I want to kind of go back because I think you said some things too that I want to touch upon. For leaders, you never think it'll happen until it happens. That's why you must, I feel like you must be prepared, and you must, in every instance, try to be prepared. And relationships matter, and don't take things too lightly, because you never think it'll happen until it happens, and you'll be that school, right? Also, when talking about the school to prison pipeline, this is huge, right? This is a lot in regards of some of the systemic things that exist within not only the educational system, but within our federal system, within what we call the American system, right?
Right. Society.
School to prison pipeline, where mass incarceration. We can go on and on about these different things. And what exists is in affluent areas, and the research says this, is that the wealth gap that exists in regards of how the criminal justice system treats those that are more affluent, and those who, goes back to what I said, those who come from that certain zip code, right? Those who can afford that bail versus those who can't.
Yes.
Those who have a family with a certain last name that knows somebody, and those who don't. Right. And this is going on and on in cities all across America. That's reality, and it goes on within our schools, right? And my call to action for leaders will be to first, I want you to, and that goes back to my mantra of being humble, being hungry, and being smart. I want you to be humble enough to say, like, hey, I want to put progress before pride, right? And that means that you may feel that you know it all, but I'm asking you now, let's go back. Let's fetch this history. When you were feeling all these different things and learning these different things in March, April, and May, let's continue to learn. Let's continue to figure out, why didn't we learn this, right? Start answering these questions and start now doing something about it, right? Now, doing something about it leads you to the hunger, right? Be hungry enough to learn these type of things, learn this information, learn this sacred knowledge, to build what I always say is protective knowledge, meaning that you are at the guards at the gates of your mind, meaning that you are only allowing the sacred truth in and being able to provide that for others. Yes. And then last, that will lead you to being smart, not just in a context of, oh, you're smart because you could pass a test score. No, you're smart because you understand the dynamics that exist with interpersonal relationships, with young people, with families, and those that exist within the system. When you do that, that is consciousness. So now you have geared up to what's called consciousness. And the evidence of consciousness is through your application. So when you apply this, you are applying consciousness. I always tell people that representation, yes, it matters. It is valuable, but consciousness is priceless. So when you apply this consciousness with young people, you will begin to unlock their hidden treasure. You will begin to unlock their purpose. And it's not just about, oh, I just need to get them all to college. It's about something that's really deeper, right? It's why they're going to college and what they're going to do beyond college. I like to tell people, I'm getting young people life ready, and I want every principal, every school leader, every district leader, every leader to get ready for life.
Right.
And that's my call to action.
I love that. I love that. You speak with such passion and such purpose. I love it. So really quick, I know we your book, I think we have the image pulled it back up right now. It's actually only $2.99 on Kindle. You can get the electronic copy right now. And I would highly encourage you to get it and elaborate so much more on what we've talked about, but you really dive in and offer this amazing resource for educators, right? Who should be reading your book? Principal Rahh.
This is perfect for that educator who's in the system and that feels like, man, I want to level up. I want to do more. I want new knowledge that can equip me with serving young people in my community, right? That inspiring leader, that revolutionary educator that is coming to try to unlock every student that they touch so they can find their hidden treasure. It's made for that educator.
I love that. I love that. I am definitely going to be sharing it with my in-laws out there in Texas as well, because I think I'm going to have to make sure I send them a complimentary copy from me to support you. And, and by the way, Alchemist is my favorite book as well. When I even want inspiration, I just go and read Alchemist again. It's so incredible. And as a writer myself, that's just kind of why I love writing stories that have such powerful impact. I'm so proud of you for writing this incredible book. And thank you for joining us. Thank you for being a voice. Thank you for being a leader. And just thank you for all that you do. Your students are quite blessed, as well as your faculty, Principal Rahh. Thank you so much. We'll see you soon.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me. And I appreciate it.
No problem. Well, everyone, thank you so much for joining us for another episode. Oh, wait, by the way, you can catch Principal Rahh. Principal Rahh, say your social media handle for the audience.
Yes, at Principal Rahh on all platforms, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Principal Rahh.
All right, with 2 H's at the end. And yep, and you know what? And that's it. Thank you so much, everyone. We will see you next week. Thank you for letting us be Unsugarcoated. Take care. Bye. Here. Come back next week.